Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today, and it's an honor to introduce really a great champion of cooperative extension, Sonny Ramaswamy. Sonny began as serving as director of USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture on May 7th, 2012. Before he came to us at NIFA, he was the dean at Oregon State University. Was there anybody here from Oregon State? Okay, no. He also had roots at Purdue, Kansas State, Mississippi State, and Michigan State. Sonny is passionate about bringing research, education, and extension to bear on the most serious challenges that the nation and the world faces. And he's also very passionate about looking forward to the future, to see how today's research, education, and extension, and tomorrow's research, education, and extension can potentially face those challenges as well. The title of his presentation today is very well in keeping with the theme, Bridging the Centuries, and I'd like to welcome to the podium Sonny Ramaswamy.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and it's great to be here this morning. Boy, it's loud. Woo! I think I woke up some people way in the back there, too. It really is good to be here this morning, and of course, you know, in Bill's introduction, he talked about all the different institutions I've been at in the last several years, and there's a couple other institutions I was at as well. I got my PhD at Rutgers University, another great land-grant university in New Jersey, and I did a sabbatical at Cornell University a few years ago up in upstate New York as well, another great land-grant university. So I dare say I'm one of the few people around that's been at 7 different land-grant universities over the years. If I can get the folks to put my presentation up in the back there, thank you very much. So there's a lot of feedback that I'm getting, folks. This needs to be turned down a little bit, or maybe I need to back up. So as Bill said in his introduction, really I thought a lot about the topic that I wanted to cover here this morning, and thinking about the title that you have selected about for Galaxy 4, Bridging the Centuries, a New Era for Extension. And I was thinking about Seaman A. Knapp, the father of Cooperative Extension Service, father of extension as we know in America and around the world as well. You know, Seaman A. Knapp, Justin Smith Morrill, Hatch, and others are amazing people that thought of the challenges that we face and how do we organize ourselves in being able to address those challenges. And I dare say, in America's history, America's global preeminence in large measure is because of cooperative extension that was invented here in this country back 100 years ago, coming on next year. And it is indeed due to people like Seaman A. Knapp that set the path forward for all of us as we're thinking about how to help our nation, and for that matter, the rest of the world as well. So, you know, over the last few years, there's been a lot of people. I've been at it now for about almost coming on 4 decades. And over the last many years, I've heard a number of people lamenting how, you know, extension, we don't need it, it's dying, it's worthless, on and on and on. And I want to paraphrase Mark Twain. You know, Mark Twain is alleged to have said, the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated, and I think the death of extension is also greatly exaggerated. We need it today more than we've ever needed it before, and I think the title that you have selected for this event here really speaks to the opportunities and the challenges that we've got all think about as well. Now, I'm supposed to have a remote control here. There it is, I see it. And so really what I wanted to do this morning is to share the next few minutes about my thoughts in regards to this extension that we're thinking of in the next next 100 years. You know, imagine that Galaxy 24, you know, if I did my math right, every 5 years, 100 years from now, there'll be Galaxy 24. There's going to be a group of individuals sitting like this and thinking about what happened over the last 100 years. And I think what we do today is going to set the set the path for us and for those people that are going to come behind us to look back and say, wow, these people set their minds, roll their sleeves up, and indeed provided us the opportunities to continue to grow and develop and address these challenges that we face as humanity as well. So I really want to think about, and I wouldn't be far off if I did, if I said that for a very long time, the research enterprise and the extension enterprise in many, many institutions has been siloed. And it continues to be siloed, by the way. We're in the 21st century. It continues to be siloed, particularly our field faculty, field staff, in different states. They're called faculty, agents, educators, etc. They feel kind of left outside of the overall system of the land-grant universities themselves. And we're going to have to figure out how best to bring that energy, that enterprise together with the research enterprise itself. So the next few slides, I want to share with you my thoughts on how we might go about doing this. And I want to, give you a little bit of a historical context where we come from. And indeed, our history gives us an opportunity to think about how do we go forward in thinking of bringing this greater level of collaboration between the research enterprise and the extension enterprise itself. I want to also then follow up with talking about a few challenges that we've got, some of these global challenges, as well as some of the local challenges that we've got to deal with. And how do we come up with transformative approaches to be able to deal with these challenges? And in trying to figure out how to come up with these transformative approaches, how do we take the best that science has to offer? In fact, Calvin's comments about Penn State, I dare say if every one of the 50 states and the many, many territories and other parts of our amazing enterprise is up here, they'd be able to share the same sorts of ideas that you did, Dennis, in talking about the kinds of things that Penn State does. And so what is that science and how do we put that science to work? And then last but not least, the educational paradigm itself. And in my mind, I think in some ways it is a sort of a back to the future. I want to share with you some of my thoughts about the educational enterprise as well. So as we're thinking about the land grant mandate itself, when the Land Grant Act was passed 151 years ago, the Morrill Act that was passed 151 years ago, when Abraham Lincoln signed the act into law, he basically said that the land grants are going to advance the common good, and they're important. They're critically important for the economic fabric of our nation as well. And so a bit of a historical context of how what we call today the land-grant universities in America, how did they come about? Of course, the first Morrill Act that was passed in 1862 set the path forward in creating these land-grant institutions, followed by the Hatch Act that created the agricultural experiment stations across our nation to discover new knowledge that was necessary to be able to address the challenges that we've faced. Ever since humanity's been around, we've had a lot of challenges that we've had to face. And this is an organized approach to be able to deploy the best science to be able to address those challenges. And then we had the second Morrill Act that came along in 1890, and also the Evans-Allen Act that came along in 1890 that created an opportunity of this land grant idea for our African American citizens of our nation. And following that, in 1914, is the Smith-Lever Act that created the Cooperative Extension Service. And after that, we had the McIntyre-Stennis Act in 1862 that created an organized approach to dealing with forestry and natural resource issues. And then in 1994, we have yet another designation of land-grant institutions. It's called as the Improving America's Schools Act. And this particular act was developed to address the needs of our Native American population in this country. And then finally, last year, 2012, March of 2012, we had yet another designation called HACUs or HISACUs, the Hispanic Serving Agricultural Colleges and Universities as well. That gives you a sort of a historical context of where we come from that constitutes what we call today as the land-grant institutions of America. And the idea embodied in the land-grant institutions is to undertake what is oftentimes referred to as fundamental research or basic research itself, also to undertake applied research, the discoveries that are needed, demonstration research and extension. Indeed, this idea about the demonstration research and extension harkens back to Seaman A. Knapp, the kind of work that he did when he was working in Texas, for example, in the southern states as well. And then last but not least, the teaching enterprise that's part of this tripartite mission that we've got that embodies all of our land-grant institutions in the United States. That gives you an idea about the land-grant mandate itself. So this ethos that we've got, this land-grant ethos that we have, all of us share collectively across America, is this egalitarian ethos that it is incumbent on us, and particularly to me, Cooperative Extension Service, capital E Extension, embodies that egalitarian idea that all comers, we're going to take on your problems and figure out how best to address that. It is an egalitarian ethos is what is embodied in this idea of this land-grant idea that we've got. The second part of this ethos is that indeed the work that is undertaken does serve as the economic engine. Going back to what Abraham Lincoln said in signing the Morrill Act, it embodies that idea that the work that we do at the end of the day is not only about discovering some new knowledge and publishing in some scientific journals and then patting oneself on one's back, but that knowledge needs to be translated in the form of solutions, and those solutions need to be applied to people's problems, and therefore it allows us to offer this economic engine as part of this enterprise that we undertake. And then, as a result of this sort of an ethos that we've got, this egalitarian ethos and the ethos of this economic engine that is being promoted, that it advances the common good as well. So that gives you a sense of the ethos where we come from. Oftentimes, in my conversations with students and faculty across the land-grant universities, I often find that people forget that this is the ethos, this is the history from which we are derived. This is in our DNA as who we are as extension professionals, as researchers, as educators as well. So if you take that ethos where we come from and what it's allowed us to do over the last 151 years, and then you project out to the future, we think of the grand challenges, grand societal challenges that we have to be thinking of as well. This guy named Richard Smalley, who got the Nobel Prize for nanotechnology back a few years ago, is in my mind the first one to really think this through and frame it as this common societal challenges. It does not matter where you are, whether you're an American or an African or an Asian or a European or an Australian. Every one of these individuals from all of these continents that we've got, they all think about these societal challenges. And in these societal challenges, every one of these, when you think of energy, we think of bioenergy, et cetera. But here's an example that Dennis Calvin was referring to earlier, that Penn State is involved in harnessing the energy that's available to us from the Marcellus Shale, and the very important work that Extension does in making sure that our other natural resources are going to be conserved and protected as well. Therein lies the application of really, really good science to address some of these challenges. So we have a whole bunch of these challenges, and I dare say every one of these challenges is par for the course as far as our extension colleagues are concerned in being able to address, and our research colleagues are concerned as well. So that's at the sort of the global level. When you narrow it down to what I like to call as the food systems itself, the 21st century food systems challenges that we can think of, is probably for me the very first, very critical food system challenge that we've got is agricultural competitiveness. We're going to have people actually going into producing the food. There's not enough people going into producing food. In fact, the average age of the American farmer in the last agricultural census was discovered to be about 57 years of age. We have another agricultural census that's going on currently at this time, and I dare say that the average age of the American farmer is going to probably be around 60 years of age. So how do we do the kinds of things, the discoveries that we need to be making, the education that we need to be offering, and the knowledge that we need to be delivering to the end users that allows these livestock producers and farmers to be able to be part of that competitive fabric that we've got, American fabric that we've got. So we have to really think very thoughtfully about how we make this happen. A second challenge that we have to think of in the food systems is the ecological footprint itself. And the ecological footprint is about conserving the natural resources, mitigating the climate footprint, the carbon footprint, the water footprint, the energy footprint, et cetera, the building that we're in, this being a LEED certified building. These are the sorts of ideas that really is very critical for our land grant institutions to be thinking of as we're going forward, making sure that we're trying to mitigate that footprint as well. Again, going back to Dennis's comments earlier, he was referring to the kinds of work that's going on here at Penn State University. A third area in terms of the food system challenges is in the realm of the bioeconomy itself. And we're tantalizingly close. I think these are real plants here, yeah. We're tantalizingly close to be able to unravel the secrets in these green leaf materials and in the wood chips and things like that. We're tantalizingly close. We're not all the way there. Plants and other organisms have been able to harness solar energy and other forms of energy to be able to produce a whole array of chemistries, as it were. If we're able to unravel those secrets, the possibilities are immense in allowing us to achieve this economic well-being that we're all about, and that the land-grant institutions have a very critical role to play as well. Last but not least, in terms of the food systems challenges that we've got to be thinking about in the 21st century, is health itself. And I dare say that health is probably going to be a significant driver of everything else that we do, whether it's agricultural competitiveness, ecological footprint, or the bioeconomy itself. And we've had for the first time in America, children born in the year 2000 and since the year 2000, in that first decade of this new millennium, children born in that decade are going to have a shorter lifespan than their parents for the very first time ever in the United States, where the longevity of people starting in the late 1800s, every succeeding generation lived for a few years longer than the preceding generation. And it has continued that way for all of these decades. And then for the very first time, children born in the year 2000, or that first decade of the new millennium, are going to have a shorter lifespan, in part because of these health issues. We've got children that are about 8 to 10 years old that have type 2 diabetes. This is an adult onset disease. Little children with hypertension, little children with cardiovascular disease and things of that nature. And I think Extension has a very, very critical role to play in being able to address these sorts of challenges that we've got as well. So that gives you a sense of the food system challenges. So going from the global challenges down to the food system challenges itself, we've got a number of things that we need to be concerned about as we're thinking about deploying our abilities to address these challenges. So the bottom line proposition is that we've got this huge population coming down the pike. It's it's projected to exceed about 9 billion people. In fact, the latest estimates are around 9.5 billion people. And we're going to have to provide their food, we're going to have to provide their shelter, we're going to have to clothe them. Oh, by the way, we're going to have to provide them their fuel as well. And that's the proposition. And with that proposition, we're going to have to address that. Oh, by the way, we're all going to have our hands tied behind our backs, the researchers, the educators, and the extension professionals that we've got. We're all going to have our hands tied behind our backs, because we're going to throw at you climate change, land and water constraints, environmental degradation, the requirement to minimize the ecological footprint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, by the way, we expect to have better health outcomes come out of this as well. Those are the challenges that we have to think about. And how do we address the idea of feeding this population, providing it shelter and clothing, et cetera, in just another 30 to 40 years, and we're going to have these challenges thrown at us. And it's going to take a very, very different sort of a mindset and a different approach to be able to address than we've done thus far in taking on these challenges. And incidentally, as we're doing this, we expect that this is all going to be done in a sustainable manner, and so that there is this sort of a nexus between food and water and energy and climate, and you can throw in all manner of things into it, and the idea that this is all going to be done in a sustainable manner. So it really becomes a pretty significant task as we're thinking about deploying our intellectual and monetary resources to be able to address these challenges. And now, when you narrow it down further, we started off at the sort of the global level, then at the food systems level, and the challenge of the population and other things, and now we think about institutional levels. I dare say every one of the individuals that's sitting here, there's going to be some common thoughts that I have pulled together here. We are trying to address these big global challenges, these 21st century food system challenges and sustainable challenges. And oh, by the way, we're going to have to deal with the budget shortfalls that we've got, or the competitiveness, the relevance, and the accountability that's expected of us. And we have a whole slew of people retiring and leaving, or just leaving, because they just do not find the opportunities to participate in this enterprise anymore. They're better off going and working in private enterprise or other places. And diversity, demographic changes that are occurring in this country that are happening so rapidly. In fact, in some states, non-whites constitute a larger proportion of the population. In fact, in Oregon, we had a projection that in just 4 more years, that the high school graduates graduating from the high schools in the state of Oregon, a quarter of them are going to be of Hispanic descent. And many of those children of people involved in the food production enterprise, and many of those children of undocumented workers, and many of those children that are going to be first-time college goers as well. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we make sure that the land-grant universities are going to be prepared to be able to deal with this sort of a demographic change that's taking place? In addition to the current changes in the ethnicity of our population, we're an aging population as well. So we've got many, many more people that are in quotes, in the geriatric range of the age span that we've got in this country. And in fact, if you look at Japan, if you look at China, if you look at South Korea, Russia, Western Europe, you see them also being a very, very rapidly aging population. And in the United States, it is because of the continual influx of immigrants is why we continue to have a relatively younger population. But even in this country, we are an aging population. As I said, in the farming enterprise, the average age of the American farmer is about 57 years of age, coming on to be about 60 years of age. So we do have some very significant demographics. And as Cooperative Extension Service, I like to say as Cooperative Extension Service, we address the pediatric to the geriatric. And in fact, we address the prenatal all the way to the graveyard, as it were. And so as we're thinking about this, the population age structure is being shifted. It's shifting more and more towards the geriatric side. And what sort of resources do we deploy to be able to address the challenges that the folks are, our nation is aging, as we're thinking about these institutional challenges that we've got to worry about as well. So it turns out, as a pretty significant challenge to, when you're thinking of the global challenges all the way down to the institutional challenges, from the global to the local, it makes you wonder, my gosh, are we going to be able to deal with this? And I dare say we're going to be able to deal with it. We have a demonstrable proof that's been demonstrated, particularly by colleagues like the folks sitting in this room, that have demonstrated over the last 100 years that we're up to and ready to take on those challenges and deal with them as well. So we have a conundrum in this country today. The conundrum is that we've had this economic downturn. We continue to have budget constraints. And in fact, in Washington, D.C., we do not have a farm bill. We do not have appropriations for FY14 yet. And we don't know where this is all going to end up. And in many, many states as well, the economic constraints continue to have offer very significant challenges. In addition to that, we've gone through over the last several years reorganization, reduced our footprints of these institutions. We've gone through, particularly in the extension world, we've gone through districting. We've got individual extension educators now serving multiple counties rather than having multiple educators in each county. We've got one educator now servicing multiple counties. We've got fewer boots on the ground. Indeed, during this most recent economic crisis that we've had in the last 5 years or so, we've had a significant loss of capacity. We've lost about a third of our footprint, extension footprint in this country. And indeed, if you go to Washington State or South Carolina or Illinois, I was talking to Bob Easter from the University of Illinois, and he was telling me that in the state of Illinois, they've probably lost about 50% of their extension footprint. So it's really gone down very significantly. And there are these expectations continue to be address that as saying that we need extension to be doing thus and such. So the expectations are out of whack with the reality of the ground truth that we've got as well. And then we've got a number of people that are running around saying, well, we need to privatize extension, that let private enterprise go ahead and take this on, that we don't need this public enterprise that needs to be supported, and that extension is not up to snuff, as it were. So this is the conundrum that we've got. So we've got all of these challenges, and then we've got these expectations, and we've got the reality of the economic downturn that we need to be very, very concerned about as well. So how do you take all this and process it and figure out how best to deploy the intellectual and monetary resources that we need to be undertaking? Now, one might take the route of the ostrich, as it were, and just hope that things are going to go away, problems are going to go away, or you take it on, and again, extension has demonstrated over the last 100 years, and the land-grant institutions have demonstrated that over the last 151 years, is to take these things on head on and figure out how best to deal with them as well. So I'd like to suggest that we need to come up with some transformative approaches. Some of you recognize the fellow that's stuck to my butt in this particular photograph here. His name is Chuck Hibbard. He's now currently at the University of Nebraska. He and I served together at Purdue University a few years ago, and as we were thinking, how do we go ahead and deal with the challenges of the state of Indiana, we started thinking about the fact that we need to be joined at the hip, that research and extension needed to be joined at the hip, and that's the only way we're going to be able to try to address these very significant local to global challenges that we've got. And so these transformative approaches, in my mind, is a very deliberate approach that integrates research and extension, that is focused on these issues that we deal with, and that results in positive change or practice in the targeted audience, as it were. This is not something that you've not thought about. I mean, every one of the, if I went around surveying the folks sitting in this room, you'd all say that, yeah, you've been thinking about this as well. Now, how do you go ahead and translate from thinking about it to action is the question that needs to come up as well. So you have to come up with a transformative program to actually develop some actionable steps, as it were. And the elements of a transformative program, from my perspective, are, obviously, it's the identification of the issues. Then you have to develop the knowledge onto, the best part about extension colleagues is the ability to think of these things in the form of outcomes-driven models, these logic models, deploying the resources. There's a marketing process involved in it. There's the public-private partnerships that are necessary. And then, very critically, bring in evidence-based and unbiased programming to the table and deliver that in a learner-centered environment, as it were, and then assess the outcome. So there's a constant assessment evaluation process, and then a reiteration of that, and then rejiggering of the approaches that we take. And if we were to go through this sort of a process and deploy this, become very purposeful and deliberate, I bet you we're going to be able to deal with these local to global challenges that I just talked about just a few minutes ago. So then as you're thinking about this, how do you rise to the challenges? Or there are a number of opportunities that are presented to us as well. And those opportunities include creating what I like to call as this innovative partnership ecosystem, crowdsourcing the best brains and the best money. That money can be public and private. It needs to occur in the form of these intellectual communities, and these intellectual communities create vibrant learning communities, and that vibrancy results in breakthrough discoveries, and that those breakthrough discoveries advance the engagement of all of the people sitting in this room with the public at large as well. And in the context of an enabling infrastructure that's needed. And finally, you got to have all this happen with our faculty and staff being empowered to be able to think this through as well, these transformative approaches. We're going to have to empower everyone to be able to come up with great ways of addressing these challenges. So we trying to think of, the constant struggle that we've got, particularly in academia, is this divide between basic research and applied research. And a lot of butting of heads, not just between researchers and extension folks, but also between the folks that do the basic research and the applied research. What I like to think of is it's not so much as basic and applied research as much as it is that you need to have fundamental discoveries that need to be integrated, that need to be adapted, and then that need to be disseminated as well. That is the continuum in the discovery through the delivery process. And the role for our extension colleagues is to be able to integrate, adapt, and disseminate. In that process of integration and adaptation, they're translating that knowledge, that the discoveries are being translated into innovations, and those innovations serve as the solutions to the problems people face as well. So there's a very nice continuum between the discovery process and the delivery process. That's what it's going to take, this sort of a transformative approach that we need to be thinking about. So putting science to work is a critical approach. I mean, you've got to have top-notch science to be able to address these really incredible challenges from the local to the global. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because Bill Hoffman said about 4 minutes ago, he said I got 5 minutes, and I've got a couple more slides to go through, Bill, if you can indulge me. And I'm not going to go through this here. My slides will be available to you. You could take a look at it. And thinking of promoting agriculture in a changing landscape, ensuring food security through safe and abundant food, deriving energy and materials from renewable commodities, and inherent in it is the bioeconomy itself and all the opportunities that are potentially afforded us. And then doing this in a sustainable manner, sustaining the environment itself, is another item that we need to be thinking about in terms of deploying the best science to be able to address these challenges. And enhancing capacity. And this, particularly in the realm of our young children and the work that's being done in 4-H. We've got 6 million children in 4-H. And how do we take that effort that we've got with 6 million children and scale it up to the 80 million children that we've got in America? Now, that's a proposition that I think you and I can take on and figure out how to scale it up and address the challenges that we've got as well. And, you know, I've got some other thoughts about how do you promote formal and informal education and the adoption of research-based technologies. These are all, you know, things that we need to be thinking of as we're contemplating these transformative approaches. And then another area is in the promotion of family and community well-being itself, and how do we start thinking of, again, fostering effective youth programs, facilitating entrepreneurship and small business development, and advancing the economic stability and security as well. These are all things that, if I went around asking, people have been thinking about. But how do you coordinate that? How do you get the science behind it to help you develop these approaches is the critical piece that's been missing in some situations. And I think as we go forward to start thinking about integrating and being purposeful and deliberate is what is going to be required in addressing these challenges. And then thinking about internationalizing extension itself, this addressing global problems. A number of institutions are doing an exquisite job of that, of internationalizing extension itself. And what are the possibilities? This idea of the local to the global, or glocalization, as I like to call that, and the opportunities that are afforded to us. So I'll give you a sense of putting the science to work, as it were. And then in terms of the education itself, we need a new educational paradigm, I think. And that new educational paradigm, again, we've been lamenting about how America's educational systems are falling apart, that we need to do something about it. And in some ways, to me, it is a back to the future approach, is what it is. And this, what I mean by this back to the future approach is in 4 domains. And those 4 domains are the workforce itself. How do we endow the young people with the skills and abilities to be able to contribute to the economic well-being of their communities? The scientific cadre that we need, the extension cadre that we need. As I said, across America, we've lost about 1/3 of our footprint, and how do we make sure that we bring enough young people coming into this extension effort as well? And then last but not least, the producers, the people that actually produce the food and put that food on our table as well. So these are 4 areas that we need to be thinking of, and I could spend a whole hour talking about these different areas. But I just want to leave you with a couple of slides reminding you about why I think of this as back to the future. If you go back to our DNA, where we come from, the Morrill Act itself, the Land Grant Act itself, the Morrill Act said there are 3 expectations in the education that needs to be offered to young people. The first expectation is foundational knowledge in the humanities and sciences. That is, the reading, writing, arithmetic, calculus, physics, chemistry, etc. Everybody has to have that. And the second thing is that there's practical education in the agricultural and mechanic arts. And then the third thing is military leadership. Not so much learning how to shoot guns as much as inculcating leadership skills. And so in modern verbiage, in 21st century verbiage, we call this cognitive skills, where you're developing technical skills, technical abilities, technical knowledge, and the so-called non-cognitive skills that are the leadership skills as well. So the characteristics of this back to the future approach of this new educational paradigm includes obviously the cognitive skills, everything from the technical skills of physics and chemistry and agronomy and crop science and animal science and entomology and plant pathology, etc., to enrichment. And in many ways, we've kind of walked away from that sort of offering that enrichment. This enrichment might be in the language skills, might be in business courses, might be in extension experiences. How many institutions across America offer explicit extension experiences to undergraduate students and graduate students? Very few. Okay, so this is something we ought to be considering as well as we're thinking of the curriculum, as we're thinking of offering education to young people, that there are these enrichment opportunities available to them as well. And then the non-cognitive skills. These non-cognitive skills are everything in the realm of leadership, teamwork, managing projects, helping inculcate critical thinking skills and independent thinking skills, communication skills, written and oral, professionalism and ethics, and last but not least, consensus and the art of compromise. We've really walked away from that sort of incorporation in the curriculum, in the educational experience of helping young people develop the art of compromise as well. We've not done a very good job of it. And I think it's about time, as we're thinking about this new paradigm, as we're thinking about this ability to come up with transformative approaches to deal with the challenges that we've got, we're going to have to think of inculcating this art of compromise as well. I'll give you a sense of the putting the science to work and the educational paradigm as well, as I'm thinking of these transformative approaches that we've got. So to wrap it all up, I want to give you another statement made by Abraham Lincoln. And this particular statement is part of a longer speech that he gave after the infamous Gettysburg battle that took place pretty close to where we are here today. And he said, we must all be thinking anew and acting anew. And I think this transformative approaches, this bridging the centuries, this new era for extension, we're going to have to step back and think anew and act anew. And thank you very much. Questions? Questions? No questions? Out?